Dear friends, supporters, improvisers, hello and welcome. This is another In Conversation, now a weekly Instagram live here at the Well's Instagram page. The Well is a global network for vocal improvisation that originally started as a website idea that would hopefully connect lots and lots of improvisers, singers, movers, anyone and everyone interested in the art form. And as always, you can head to the wellvocal.com, you can create a profile, you can see a beautiful global map with over 1,000 members, event listing, and soon the resources page, and much, much, much more. But now, on to this week's conversation. Every week we want to welcome someone that is really active in the scene, that is doing something unique. And this time we have Davin Youngs from Chicago, also from Chicago Circle Singing. We're going to chat for the first time ever, meet here online, and talk about what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic. My name is Jaka Škapin, I'm this week's host, and I'm currently in Celje, Slovenia. So let us see if Davin is ready to join us. Give a second. Let's see if we can invite him into the conversation. Okay, one more moment. And I hope that you also had the time to check our other conversations over on the page.
Hey, Yaka.
Hello, good evening and good afternoon
Yeah,
to
good to see you.
Chicago. Really nice to see you. Thank you for joining.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, in terms of starting off, I'm always interested in how someone found their way into this community, into this practice. It doesn't have to be a full biography, it doesn't have to be the full story, but maybe a moment or an impulse or a happening or someone that led you on this journey.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with Bobby McFerrin. I had um, so I've been a singer my whole life and spent my younger years studying classical music and ended up going to a conservatory for music, and then in my adult years try to figure out what does one do with that degree if one doesn't pursue
Mm-hmm.
operatic singing. And so I was teaching, and I came across a teacher named Jeannie Levetri, who is the creator of something called somatic voice work. And I did a lot of work with her to find more authenticity and freedom in my voice. And at the end of like a long stint of working with her, I was like, I really don't know what to sing now. And that's what led me to go do circle songs with Bobby McFerrin at the Omega
Mm-hmm.
Institute. All the way back now, almost, it's crazy, almost 10 years ago, 2015, I went to circle songs. And it was truly one of the most transformative weeks of my life. It was a real challenging week in a lot of ways. But it was such a monumental shift in how I saw what was possible for the voice and what it meant to come together in community and sing. And one of my strongest memories from that week at the Omega Institute, if people aren't familiar, it's in Rhinebeck, New York. And Bobby McFerrin used to, he doesn't do it there anymore, but he used to do this week-long workshop where we would sing in huge circles, like 180 people. But one of my strongest memories is that very first like 2 days there, I couldn't sing at all because I was so overcome with the emotion of just hearing everyone's voice that I just like every time I tried to sing, I would cry. And that was the start of a real adventure in improvisational singing for me, and really sort of shifted my whole framework and perspective around what it meant to use my voice, and particularly to use my voice in community with others.
And there's something so interesting about, being in this big group and improvising, because you probably had choir experiences before. I
Yes.
also had classical training. I'm used to being in a choir, and you are in big groups, but I think the feeling of it, especially your internal external perception, is so different.
Yeah.
So how would you describe what is the actual difference? Maybe the felt difference or the difference in expression, attention, because I think people are used to communal singing in choirs or formal concert settings. But what does actually change when we're improvising?
My belief is that circle singing in particular is the fastest way in. So it is how people can find themselves connected through collective community-based singing the most quickly. The beauty of it is you don't have to know the song. You don't even have to think that you're good at singing in order to do that. You just have to be willing to show up and use your voice open-heartedly. And there is this sort of spiritual magic that occurs. I'm the son of a minister. My father was a United Methodist minister. So I grew up leading in front of
Hmm.
church. And that's the best way that I can describe it is it feels like a spiritual divine experience with collective singing. And that's, there's a reason that most religious traditions have utilized collective singing as a part of finding shared vision and shared community and direction. But there's a specific magic to the improvisation being not laden with any sort of dogma or right or wrong, or any sort of expectations around what should be, especially for now there might be some expectations from the leader and the facilitator, but from the participants, you're just along for the ride. And there's a freedom, a fear too that comes with that, but there's a freedom and a liberation that manages to manifest. And when we're all feeling that together, we find ourselves feeling deeply connected very quickly. It's very powerful in that regard.
Hmm. And talking about community, let's jump straight into discussing Chicago circle
Yeah.
singing. I am particularly interested in your return after the pandemic. I think a lot of singers, communities were struggling with how to bring something back. You can give me a little bit of a history, a breakdown, but especially then how you returned after the pandemic.
Yeah, so when I came back from Circle Songs with Bobby, I was looking for a group in Chicago and there wasn't one. And so I started one. And that was all the way back in 2015. It started with a group of invited singers that I brought together and I filmed us. Participating in that and sort of built a community for the next 4 years around that. Although it was always small, it was, relatively small. We would generally be 10 to 15
Hmm.
people. Sometimes we had as many as like 30 people. I was hosting it. I had a studio space and I was hosting it. And honestly, if I'm really truthful, I just got burned out of the leading and the facilitating and trying to get everything together all the time. And it happened to correspond that I put a pause on circle singing right before the pandemic hit. And so then I felt some relief in that it felt like we weren't supposed to sing together anyways, so that felt okay. And then after the pandemic, I've also done, I know that we share, and maybe folks who would watch us and listen to this, I've done a lot of work with Rhiannon, the teacher Rhiannon, who's a colleague of Bobby. And I was doing that prior to the pandemic, going and doing workshops with her. I brought her to Chicago twice
Hmm.
to do workshops. Um, and after the pandemic, a friend here in Chicago, Stacey Ehrenberg, had just come back from doing some work with Rhiannon, and she had reached out to me and she's like, I'd like to get some people together to do improvisational singing together. And so we started with a small group. And when we started with that small group, this was in 2022. It just felt really good. It felt really good to sing together, and it reminded me of my love and desire for doing this. And when we started as a small group, probably 4 or 5 months in, 6 months in, I was like, why aren't we doing this with the bigger community? So I found a space locally, and just put the call out to our old email list. And I don't know, Yaka, something happened. Like we right away, the very first gathering, we had 30 people. And then like at the next gathering, we had 50 people. And so now we've been doing this for a little over a year and we routinely get between 65 and 85 people that come to this. And I can't tell you why. It
Okay.
just happened.
But you know, beyond the divine, I know that you also create a lot of content. You're
Yes.
quite active on social media, which not, you know, everyone is. And it's also a big discussion within this community in particular, how to market, what to say. You know, what do you say on the poster or on your call out? What is it? Why are people coming? And then how do you deal with this idea of being in the moment and at the same time thinking about content creation or, you know, documentation? How do you approach it? Or do you have any tips, any suggestions?
Well, first of all, we live in the era that if you want to garner attention for your event, you need to have evidence of it existing. You know, it's not you're less likely to grow in a large way if you aren't really visible and kind of in people's face with what it is that you're doing. So right away, I mean, honestly, at the very first gatherings, I hired a photographer,
Mm-hmm.
hired videographers. I paid out of my own pocket right away because I was like, I really want to capture what it is that we're doing, so that we can show. Also, a lot of people are probably familiar with the Gaia Collective in New York, and I saw what was happening
Mm-hmm.
to them, and I saw the types of videos that they were sharing, and I was like, it was very enticing to watch what they were doing. And we're not doing, I mean, we're strictly doing improvisational singing. They do a cappella singing of songs, and we don't do that in our gathering. Not that we wouldn't in the future, but I was borrowing from their playbook, and I was like, I'm just going to keep posting a lot of videos of us doing, and we haven't gone viral like the Gaia Collective has. But I also invested in sponsoring. I made one specific video that I
Mm-hmm.
routinely sponsor the post. And a lot of people, the reason I bring up Gaia is because a lot of people will say, I've seen the Gaia Collective in New York and I was looking for something similar in Chicago and I found you. And so just having that visibility attached to someone else's, good fortune of growing what it is that they're doing has been really key. But there are some complexity around it. We've also had some questions around, some people don't necessarily want to be
Mm-hmm.
filmed. And I am certainly sympathetic to that. But this big gathering that we do, it is now in our, like, if you sign up through Eventbrite, it says you're green to be
Yeah.
filmed. And I'm really vigilant about always capturing moments of what it is that we're doing because every time we get lots of new people. The other thing about this is I've learned is for some people this is like a come regularly thing, and for others it's a one and done. And that is okay. But in terms of like the volume, you have to keep reaching out to the one and done people too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I've just accepted that that's like a part of we're always needing to bring in new people to keep the volume. And I also want to say though that the only reason I care about the numbers is because it feels so good when you have a lot of people. It's not about like and I mean this sincerely from the bottom of my heart. It's not an ego thing of like how many people can we get in the room. It's totally like a bursting heart thing that when we have 85 people, it feels so freaking good. Like, and um the other reason I care about that too is because this specific gathering, I'm marketing to people who have maybe had singing as a part of their life in the past, but have lost touch with that in some way, and they're just looking for a space to sing. And so I'm really interested in this being a big gathering because it's easier to sort of fold into the mix, and not feel exposed. That's really scary if you're in a small gathering and you're inexperienced at this kind of work. For folks like me, I love the small gatherings too, but for most people, it's easier to fold into 30 other people and not feel exposed and then gain your momentum around what it is that you're doing. So there is a volume game that is necessary to sort of keep it going, and that is just like keeping capturing what it is that we're doing, posting on Instagram particularly, and
Mm-hmm.
just like, and also we got featured in a news spot, which was really cool. That actually was an amazing experience. The local news did a piece on us, and they did a really beautiful job of telling the story of what it is that we do. So I've had some things like that happen that have been really key.
Brilliant. Yeah, another shout out to Gaia Music Collective.
Yep,
Matt is going to be here doing an interview with me as well in a couple of weeks. So we're going to get deeper
yep,
into how they started from that sort of backyard, collection of
yep,
friends. And yeah, I think it's really interesting to compare also the experience of the community in the United States to Europe, right? Because we seem to have a lot more events here, but
yes.
I think in some ways you kind of have to be even more media savvy over there in order to create, this kind of buzz. And I think there's a lot to learn from it if people can kind of get the right balance, because of course it's not the same, being in New York and having the influx of new young people every single week and all the excited artists, or being somewhere which is much smaller, smaller town as well. So for you, yeah, what kind of things do people say? The first comers, they've never done it. What do they say before? I think it's good to talk about it because it doesn't get said that much. What do they say before? What are their fears? What do they say afterwards? And what do you, tell them, before, during, after, as a facilitator?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of experience leading people in my life in a lot of different ways, shapes, and forms. And so I would say that the special skill and ability that I bring to this kind of work, particularly in leading collective singing, is that I've got a lot of years under my belt doing it. And and I also do it in the corporate arena. Um, I'm used to going into spaces where people are very unlikely to sing together and getting them to sing together.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't so much intimidate me. And so I just treat our circle singing gathering very similarly to how I would even a corporate gig where I just start singing. I
Mm-hmm.
actually don't give people the opportunity at the front end of the experience to contemplate too much what's going to happen. I think this is a important aspect of, especially for the beginner, because if someone is fearful and you give them too much space to narrate a story around why they should or shouldn't do it, they're not going to do it, or they're going to do it trepidatiously. And I do this in what I call baptism by fire. We just start singing, and honestly, that's not different than Bobby McFerrin. Bobby always communicates with fewer words and more singing, and I think that that is by design. I think that's very intentional. Um, it is often the case that when I start to sing, and again, if you go to chicagocirclesinging.com, there's a video that shows the whole arc of our experience, and it does a really good job of capturing. You see everyone just sitting around talking, and then I start singing, and then they stand up, and then they're singing. And that's really the form that I use most often. And so when I first start to sing, people are looking at me with like the fear of God in their eyes sometimes. If they've never been there before, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I going to get it right? And but then within a matter of moments, they're just doing what we're all doing. And then from there, we have opportunities to talk and connect. But from there, they're like, I don't know what the hell this is, but it's fun. That was amazing. I've never heard anything like that. I've never experienced anything like that. What language are you speaking? It's the
Mm-hmm.
standard sort of stuff. And so I really am passionate about bringing people into the actual embodied experience of using their voice and community quickly without talking about it. From there, we can pull apart. But most people are going to talk themselves out of being willing to do certain things because they have all sorts of stories and narratives around what they can or can't do with their voice or what they should or shouldn't be allowed to do. And so this space is not for those kinds of stories to perpetuate. This is a place to pull apart those stories from the past and just find our way into the actual embodied experience of singing.
Hmm. And so then over time, when people keep coming, what does change about the relationship, the feel in the room, the confidence, the expression? How do you, describe how the community itself changes over time when they keep coming back and delving deeper and deeper into the practice?
Well, it's a relief as a leader when you have regulars because they lead within the circle. There's a level of confidence that they're able to approach the work with. They get it. There are two types of people that generally find their way into this work. The ones that just want to show up and sing. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to learn anything. They just want to do whatever you tell them to do, and they just want to sing and they want to feel good and dance and move their body and use their voice. Then there's the other group, and I think you and I fall into that, where we go in and we use it, and they're like, wait, can I do this? Am I able to lead? How is he doing this? What's the format? What's the formula? How is this unfolding? And that's where the regulars, there's a group of regulars. We actually just hosted um, last month how to facilitate
Hmm.
circle singing workshop that was really well attended with some amazing local singers. And again, these aren't necessarily like musicians like in a traditional sense, but they're people that have skill as singers, and they have rhythmic skill, and they're really interested in being seen and heard and standing at the middle of the circle. And so that group, it's important, and I'm working at being better at this, to lift them up and help them find their way into the center of the circle if they want to lead, because I think that's the only way you stay interested in the work. It's not generally fun for a lot of us to just have one singular person lead over and over again. There has to be this reciprocity
Yeah.
of experience. That being said, having sung with Bobby and Rhiannon and stuff, there's a freedom that you feel when you have a very skillful leader
Hmm.
that can just like go an hour straight and crush it. That there's so much freedom and joy in
Yeah,
watching that
yeah.
process unfold.
Yeah, and there's that pedagogy of shared leadership that, for instance, exists within Música do Círculo from Brazil as a pedagogy, and that actually there's a lot of it also in Europe. So I hope also in the future there's more of an interchange, North America, Europe, especially about the pedagogy, because there's so many different skill sets in different countries to be kind of explored and put together in the same
Yeah.
room. And so you're already talking a little bit about your corporate experience. I'm now going to pivot towards your work as a sound healing artist, the reset.
Yeah.
I'm just really, of course, I love following the content and the beautiful venues and the beautiful sounds and the experiences that people have. And so you can just talk freely about just your relationship to you being a sound healing artist. What does that mean to you? How is that related, of course, with vocal improvisation? And what does it bring to your life, to your work, to your facilitation?
Yeah. I mean, this is, um, so I'm just going to give a little bit of context for folks who don't know. They're probably like, if I were to share about myself as a singer and a coach and a leader, there are four aspects to my work. One is that I do one-to-one voice coaching, and I've done that for like 20 years. And then the other is leading improvisational singing locally on a community level. Then I lead improvisational singing in corporate groups. And then finally, on a performance level, I create these immersive sound healing experiences, and it's called the Reset. You can learn more at the resetsoundexperience.com. But I developed the Reset through practicing circle singing with loopers.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back from Omega. I wanted to lead locally. I started to lead locally, and I bought looping devices, and I was practicing creating loops with improvised syllables and phrases, as a means of becoming a better leader in the center of the circle. But during some time on my own, I would create these loops, and then I would just lay there and listen to them. And I was like, there's a drone quality, but then even though they weren't shifting and changing, it kind of felt like they were shifting and changing as I would listen. And it was around that time that I was also engaging more heavily into like yoga practices, really diving deeper into my meditation practice. And I was familiar with sound baths, particularly with like the gong. And it just occurred to me one day after a yoga class, I was like, what if I created a loop, like these loops, but then folded in these instruments associated with sound as a healing modality, like uh, crystal singing bowls, tuning forks, and the gong. So I spent hours, like countless hours, on my own in my studio creating loops, integrating these instruments, and then ultimately I felt compelled to integrate electronic
Mm-hmm.
beats. And I developed this whole format that I can't really describe where it came from. It was some sort of weird download that came from on high. I don't know. But I started doing it locally in yoga studios and meditation studios, and then I brought it to unconventional spaces. And now I'm doing it in big concert halls around the country and hopefully around the world. And so it's a sound bath, but it centers improvisational singing in my voice through looping devices with a lot of different effects. And then ultimately, I integrate, like I said, electronic beats. But people typically lie down at the event. They close their eyes. It's just like a sound bath. It's amplified. The whole experience is amplified. What's happening through my voice is all amplified. And then a lot of the instruments are acoustic. So, like the gong, um, tuning forks, things like that. I'm playing those acoustically. And one of the things that's so magical about that is that it creates this sort of disorienting factor with the sound. You don't necessarily know where the sound is coming from, and that's part of what helps your mind turn off some of the
Hmm.
thinking that you might be doing. But I know that anyone who's done improvisational singing and done circle singing knows that there's a meditative quality to it. You know, the repetition has a way of sort of seeping in, and you don't necessarily know how much time has passed. You don't even know where you are at certain points. And so I'm tapping into a lot of those same ideas and experiences, but in this case, I'm the one making all the sound, and other people are invited to just receive it in whatever way feels useful for them.
Yeah, there's that reality of entrainment,
Yes,
right? When the loops are being repeated and what
absolutely.
happens in our brain, our physiognomy, and all the rest. And maybe sometimes when we do circle singing, we're focusing on something else, like the music, building the music or another part of it. But then if we can slow it down in moments and just be with the sound, right? It gives us all these other effects as well. And I think a lot of people do this practice by themselves,
Yes.
for themselves, as improvisers, right? They find this way in, and then it deepens and deepens. And sometimes they share it, sometimes they don't. I think what you're doing by pushing it out there, I see it almost also as an invitation to others, because sometimes, improvisers and artists are also quite shy about that part, or actually saying, I am a sound healing artist. For a lot of people, that's quite a bold statement, right? And also I see it as, so then, yeah, an invitation to just share more of that, and it doesn't have to be on a big stage. I mean, for me, I've done a lot of work with dance with Parkinson's. We've done a project in care homes,
Yeah.
hospitals, that actually just, in ways reenacts what happens in a circle, but
Yeah.
just for a different group of people. So all those kind of levels of sharing, I think they're so important. So it doesn't stay just our own individual internal practice. I think there's so much value just in the sharing in all kinds of different spaces.
Yeah.
But I still want to ask you about, the term sound healing. For me, I go in and out. I go in, I'm really with the healing word, and then I go out. Am I in with the healing word? I don't know why. Probably I'm more of a, you know, I don't know, European, the European anarchic nihilist side of me, comes in at some point, but not really. I'm semi-joking. But yeah, I want to ask you about your relationship with the word. Has it ever been, an uncomfortable fit, or has it always been, yes, solid fit, sound healing? That's
Yeah.
me.
I think no, it hasn't always felt like that. So I did, at one point, I went and did some training at a place, actually also in upstate New York, called the Menla Institute. I did a workshop with the Sage Academy for Sound Energy Healing. And when I was first discovering some of the relationship with these
Mm.
instruments that are associated with this modality, I had a lot of questions around cultural appropriation. I had a lot of questions around like my own relationship to that, those words, that terminology. I questioned a lot. And I do not typically refer to myself as a sound healer. That's why I sort of
Hmm.
adopted this term, sound healing artist, because the art is at the center. The thing about the word healing is that it really speaks to what it is that I want to call forth in the experience. Like,
Hmm.
I want this to be explicitly about your own personal growth, transformation, and healing. And the way that I'm interested in doing that is not by healing you. I'm interested in holding a space that you could find the healing that you would need for yourself. I will say, I'm 43 years old, and I'm not so interested in debating terminology personally as much as I used to be.
Hmm.
Because sometimes you just got to say the thing and then do your version of it. As long as it's not a term that's going to cause harm to others, say what you want to say. You know, like I think there's a lot of debate around some of these terms because people are afraid of being a snake oil salesman, or like that they're going to create, you know, some sort of harm. And I really know at the heart of my intention is to be a good space holder, a good leader, and really to speak. I have a background in performance, right? Like I spent my whole childhood and my whole teen years and young adult years using my voice for performance. This is not meant to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the terminology matters. The word I use most in my life is I say I'm a singer. That's, if you ask me what do I do, I say I'm a singer.
Yeah.
But in this realm of using my voice, of singing, I'm interested in how my voice could be a tool for healing, could be a conduit for personal growth and transformation, a sonic container for the community to find change. And that's really what my relationship to the word is. I'll leave you with one other thing. I say this a lot. A lot of people have heard me say this before, but it's a fascinating thing. In the dictionary, in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, English dictionary, when you look up the word to heal, you'll find to become sound. Sound is synonymous with healing, which is synonymous with being whole. And I think that that's a really important thing to consider about what it means to engage that term. Healing, or to be healed, is the experience of wholeness. And that is represented most perfectly in the power of sound.
Yeah, and also what I hear is all the experience and this notion of the artistry being central, right?
Yes.
I have a similar experience when working in music therapy environment, and I'm not a music therapist, but
Yeah.
a lot of the times the work that we do is therapeutic, but it
Yes.
still centers artistry. And I still think, again, same as with the previous, comment that I made, there's so much space for artists to enter these spaces and not to wait to have a degree. And I mean,
Yes.
there is the intention part, there's the experience part, but so many people could go in these spaces and work alongside, music therapists or work alongside other healers and just engage and not to be, stopped by the barrier of the identification or the term itself, right?
Yeah.
And I think
I mean,
another,
it's 6-1. Like it there, I could argue both sides of this. Like you know, I think that there are a lot of people, um, like I would never call myself a therapist, a sound therapist. And people ask me about, like, I am not an expert on the science of sound. It is not my passion. My passion is actually the artistry of it. My
yeah,
passion is creating an artistically beautiful experience that people can find the experience that they want within. That being said, I wouldn't, I'm really careful about not using terminology that claims more than I can deliver. And I think that everyone should be concerned with that. That being said, this work is not governed by any governing body. There's no agency, and honestly, the people that do certifications and stuff, a lot of times they're not necessarily based in any sort of overarching governing body. I don't mean to be shady in saying this, but a lot of times it's a way of making money. If you put
hmm
a label upon, we give you this certification. I have no judgment, respect. People can do what they want, but I think that there's real power in laying claim to who it is that you are, what it is that you want to offer the world, and just sort of like running with that in a way that feels really authentic and true. We will always get into trouble when we find ourselves outside of what feels authentic
yeah.
to what it is that we're trying to create.
And in the end, I think this artistic focus definitely goes back to people we mentioned, like Bobby and Rhiannon,
Yes,
right? And who create these spaces with such deep artistry, which can
absolutely.
have healing effects for people, which can have therapeutic effects for people, or therapeutic, healing experiences. But their focus is the music, is the artistry, and I think that's definitely always has been the anchor for me as well.
One thing so one of the things, like at my sound healing experiences, there are two factors in this, and I think this is true of circle singing as well. One is that you're not meant to sit and watch me. Like you're welcome to, but you're really meant to watch within. And the same is true in the circle. When people stand in the circle, it's not about any individual voice being the most important voice. It's about how we can elevate the circle as a whole. And that's true even from a leadership standpoint and from a soloing standpoint. What would lift the community as a whole? That is very clear to me, if when someone's putting on a show as an artist and I'm in the audience and I'm sitting and watching them, that's a different dynamic. Now, I can walk away from one of those experiences feeling like it's restored me or healed me in some way. I'm not saying that's not true, but it's different to enter into a space and have someone give you permission to not watch them, to not like sort of take it in as something you have to consume, but allow you to participate in it as you heal. And so these sound healing experiences I'm creating, one of the unique aspects to it is that we're using the physical space differently. So I've done stuff in orchestra halls, and while some people are sitting in the audience, a lot of people are sitting on or lying down on the stage, or even in the aisles or in the boxes. And that's very intentional as a means of shifting or flipping the script on the space so that folks don't feel like they have to consume what I'm doing in the
Hmm.
way they would a performance. And that again is just my hope is to create something that feels more expansive and like it carries the potential for this aspect of healing in the work.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think it gives a different idea of performativity, right? Because we're used to that whole separation between the person on stage and the person in the audience, and also we're used to a certain kind of performance in our everyday lives, in
Yeah.
our social lives.
Yes.
And I think what improvisation brings, I mean, to a certain extent, it breaks down that idea of performativity, and what is left is a different kind of connection.
Yes.
And I think then all of the other elements can just amplify that flow, that's already in the space. Which is a beautiful thing. I
It is, and it's so the power is so underestimated from folks who haven't done it.
mhm.
Because if you're used to operating by rote, it will feel, it will feel A, intimidating, but B, like maybe silly if you haven't gone into this type of experience in this type of space where so much is left open to chance. I'm sorry, the other thing I should have said too, the reset is entirely improvised. So what I create too with that, I have a form that I use and the beats I've pre-programmed,
Mhm.
but I'm singing live to the beats and creating them on the spot what I'm singing. So that's the other aspect. And I'm trying to sing as inspired by the people in the room
Yeah,
and the actual physical
yeah,
space too.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's the other thing that I've been recently also looking at is the play of musical identities in the space
Hmm.
and how actually just one person connecting with the space and the people in it can sing everything in the space, not just
Yeah.
themselves. And then people feel that, right? And they open up in a different way if they would like to and if they're ready, right?
Yes.
And that creates a whole different experience for everyone, including the space itself, right? I'm sure you leave many things in the spaces, in the physical spaces,
This
in
is
the roofs
one of
and
the yeah, this is one of the
ceilings
things we
and
talk about.
floors.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, especially like so here in the US, I had the great honor and privilege of bringing the reset to the Kennedy Center a couple weeks ago, and I can't help but be there and think about the amazing voices that have sung in that hall, like some of the best voices of our time, you know, and what vibrational imprint do those voices leave? And do the walls remember? Do the floors remember? How is that actual physical space changed? And then I even think about concert halls as sacred spaces. They were literally built to reflect, to amplify, to reverberate sound. I mean, how incredible is that? And when we come in and we make new sounds in that space, we're just contributing to this river, this flow of vibrational goodness that has been, happening for years and years and years. And it's sacred ground. It's holy ground to me. And to be able to participate in that open-heartedly is a real gift. It's a real pleasure.
Davin, thank you so much. I think this idea of this vibrational gift is a good one to leave the people with, to invite them to reverberate in any spaces they might find themselves in. I really want to thank you for your work, for your openness, for your social media game and inspiration. And I hope you stay connected with the well. And of course, I hope you share, this idea of the well also with your community and further, because it's really open to anyone and everyone interested in improvisation. and we're just starting to build more and more bridges. So thank you for being a part of it at this stage, and hopefully we get to chat more at some point in the
Yeah,
future.
absolutely. Thank you, Yaka. And anyone who's watching or listening, if you're in Chicago, check out chicagocirclesinging.com. We'd love to have you be a part of that, what it is that we're doing, and then stay connected to me. You can learn more about me through my Instagram profile here or davinyoungs.com. But I'm really, really interested in this global community. That's, you and I don't know each other, but we seem to know
We
each
do, but
other.
we
And
do. Of course
that's
we
what
do.
happens. That's what happens. It's happened to me for years, and it's a really, really special part of this work that we're doing. So grateful for
Brilliant.
that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
let's keep exchanging. Davin Youngs, thank you everyone for listening, and have a good evening, afternoon, morning.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
See
Ciao,
you.
ciao.
Bye.